Hey there, Feeling Seen fans. We have got a great episode from the vault for you today with the terrific Nida Manzoor. We wanted to bring this one back for you in particular because the second season of Nida's fantastic show, Lady Parts, has finally landed on streaming. It's been a long time, and you can watch that on Peacock. I spoke to Nida when her action comedy Polite Society was premiering last year. It's a delightful time, especially if you enjoy movies about sisters, and I do. So enjoy the episode, and we will have a fresh, new One Quick Thing at the end for you. So stick around for that. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. My co-host for today is someone who I have been hoping and dreaming of getting on this show since its very inception. One of those like, well, who would you like to have on Feeling Seen, Jordan, if we actually get to do this? And this person, this writer, this director, this creator of the hit comedy We Are Lady Parts on Peacock, this writer-director of the new film Polite Society that is an absolute blast, Nida Manzoor, welcome onto the pod. Is there anything else that people should know about you fundamentally before we get going so we have a good foundation under us?
Ooh, no, thank you, Jordan. Thank you for that incredibly warm welcome.
Of course.
I think you said it all. You said it all. You know, that's who I am. That's where I'm at. I'm excited to be here.
Well, and you're also BAFTA nominated writer and director for We Are Lady Parts. And
I must correct you, Jordan. I did actually win the BAFTA. BAFTA winning.
BAFTA winning. Oh, God.
And it was given to me by Olivia Colman, which was probably the coolest part of it. So,
what does one do when both faced with at the same time one's own BAFTA and Olivia Colman?
I think I said something like, Olivia Colman just gave me a thing. I actually went down. It was honestly my thought. I was like, she just touched me. It was just all too much.
Honestly, though, that's not entirely different from what Olivia Colman did when Olivia Colman won an Academy Award. She just got up on stage and called it a joke and barely was able to get out of her seat. So you and Olivia Colman have I feel like a similar response to receiving pinnacle awards in your career.
Yeah, I suppose anything that makes me closer to Olivia Colman, I'll take it.
So, Polite Society, what a wonderful time at the movies that was. I'm immediately charmed getting into anything that's going to be this is going to be about martial arts, it's going to be about fighting, and it's going to be about sisters doing sister things and having a sister's love story. Sister love stories, girl best friend love stories, that's going to really be my home base as I wear my Jennifer's Body t-shirt during this interview. I guess before we get into the sort of meat of the conversation, I wanted to hear what sister love stories mean to you. And I think that will sort of take us into your filming character pick for this as well.
True, absolutely. I grew up with an intensely close relationship with my older sister. We're a year apart. You know, we're best of friends and worst of enemies and went through all the ups and downs of what it means to be a sister. I just don't feel like we see it enough on screen. And every time I have seen it or something equivalent, a sister friendship, friendship, female friendship, it's just enlivening because it's so unique in its brutality, but in its love that I was like, I need to do this. And I want to do it with the action genre. Because again, action doesn't really look at what it means to be a woman, what sisterhood is. So just mashing those things together was so exciting.
I think a thing I really liked about, a thing I loved about the action in Polite Society, actually, is that there is a rawness to it. We're in this amazing sort of bloom of action cinema where I feel like people are really, it's one of my, specialty areas, and it's so exciting to see people taking it more seriously as an art form and being like, hey, stunts for Oscars, and 8711 and the 87 North guys coming in and sort of revolutionizing how seriously we take action presentation here in the United States, competing on par with, I would say, films in Southeast Asia that come out of places like Indonesia and South Korea. And what we see in We Are Lady Parts is this really raw, tangible kind of action choreography and fighting style where you feel like these people, it's a little bit secret agent, surprise secret agent, but it also feels like things that this high school girl could do these things. The way that these two girls in this school are kicking each other's ass right now during passing time. I don't feel like I'm watching a Marvel character right now. I feel like I'm watching two girls just unleash the inner beast. And I thought that was a really thoughtful choice as like narrative as action that was part of this movie.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you. I mean, yeah, I was so keen on the actors doing as much of the fighting as possible. I didn't care for it to be perfect. I cared more for to feel the character in their bodies, to feel so much of that characterization comes through the physical performance. So I just wanted the actors to do as much, and then, you know, working with the stunt team to pitch the fight at the right level so they could feel really powerful. You know, I'm glad you felt the rawness, because this is a film about a teenage girl and her experience. And that's how I approach the filmmaking. I'm like, this is Rhea's movie as she would make it.
I like that. It's Rhea's movie this is the movie she would make. It's like we're watching her make her movie to be this, like aspiring to be this stunt woman in real time. I really like that.
Absolutely. Which was so freeing for us, because, you know, we had support, but, you know, sometimes we had to enter some gonzo style filmmaking. I had these really elaborate sequences. We got to like strip it down. We need to finish the day. We need to make it. And it required us to be light on our feet and like be fast, be kind of move. And again, approaching it in that punk spirit and with that sort of teenage angst kind of driving it was really fun. And that's how we approached the action. We wanted it to feel visceral, but we wanted it to feel raw. We wanted to feel the bodies, that these women in their bodies, you know, have Rahila and Rambucha really, she was on the wire doing those wire moves, and just seeing her fly was like, oh, but as much as the actors could do, I was so excited. I just loved seeing them do the moves. There's a truth in that. And, you know, Hong Kong Kung Fu does that, but with incredible martial artists.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole different kind of thing. But there's, again, a joy of seeing an actor do the fighting, because you feel it. You feel the character.
I completely agree. And this makes me think of, this is neither here nor there, but there's a Hong Kong movie called The Inspector Wore Skirts. And there's one action sequence near the end of that where you watch the stunt performer jump from like a second story balcony to drop kick someone on the ground floor. They hit that person, they kick them, then they hit the ground, and you watch them like recoil in pain and grab their back. And you're like, boy, they had to get that in one, because that person couldn't come down that drop again. But that's when you're like, yep, that's what that fight would look like. That person's not popping right back up. That's some real life shit right there. But Polite Society being the story of a high school girl whose college-age big sister, the coolest person in her world, who is critically depressed. They rely on each other. They lean on each other. They're like the best of friends. And then her older sister, like, she starts pairing off with a guy who takes a shine to her. It becomes a fast and furious relationship. And her younger sister, Rhea, is just so sure that something is wrong with this guy. So Polite Society is the story of the younger sister and her friends trying to band together to protect the older sister from this probably sinister man and his very involved mother. And so that takes us into the story of another girl at odds with coming of age, and the character you've brought for us to discuss today, Vivian Abramowitz in Slums of Beverly Hills, as played by Natasha Lyonne. And like, as you were talking about like the rawness and the messiness, and I've read you talk about like with Polite Society wanting to make something where like the violence of teenage girlhood was something that was actually presented manifestly in physical violence on screen. This movie is like discomfort coming of age comedy at its sort of most indie 90s and like visceral. And what was your initial experience in your life with the Slums of Beverly Hills?
Jordan. I watched that film I love as a teen, I would voraciously, consume teen movies.
Okay.
It was young men at the heart of them. And Slums of Beverly Hills was the first time I'd seen one that centered a woman that I really connected with, that actually explores the experience of being a teenage girl. And like, as you say, the most visceral form. I'm evangelical about this film. Not enough people have seen Slums of Beverly Hills.
Of the like Natasha Lyonne 90s canon, it does not rise to the headline status that it should.
It's a bloody masterpiece, and I'm obsessed with it. And so much of like being in your body as a teenage girl, it's weird, man. I feel like I went through a period where I really felt alienated from my own body. I was doing martial arts. I love sports. And all of a sudden you're like, go from a child to being like an object, and everybody looks at you. And that opening scene in Slums of Beverly Hills where her dad is like, my kid just got stacked.
She's a bit of a tomboy, isn't she?
What do you suggest? It's the first one.
Her first?
Yeah.
She needs more than a training bra, I can tell you that.
It happened, I tell you, overnight. She got stacked just like her mother.
God.
She wants with the underwire.
Just a normal one that doesn't point.
I'll need to measure her. We need to find out her cup size.
Right. Okay, I'll take a walk.
You'll need to lift up your arms. That a girl.
And she's there awkwardly trying on a bra, feeling all the shame. And I think her opening lines are like, I'm deformed.
I'm deformed. She's just standing there in a bra, looking entirely normative body and just being like, I'm deformed simply by virtue of my boobs having arrived. Like, oh God, this is the worst day of my life.
Absolutely. Honestly, I felt so seen in that first scene because I felt the same, the exact same. The girl gets her boobs first and everybody's just like, what has happened? You feel like a circus freak. That film just so encapsulates that. And for me, making Polite Society, I wanted to use action because it's so embodied. It's, it's so cathartic because I got to show a teenage girl in her body feeling physically unified with it in a way that I felt like separation happened. Slums of Beverly Hills really looks at that separation that happens. It's so hard to describe it, but it's just beautifully done in this movie, and seeing the way, Vivian is now treated differently, the way she feels alienated from her body, where the way she's told that she's somehow, her look is sort of trashy, having just like humor of a trashy and kind of passe, big boobs passe, and it's just the constant objectification. I felt so seen, and Tamara Jenkins just pours in so much love, so much nuance, so much hilarity. This film was everything for me, and it's one I constantly go back to when I'm, starting a new project.
Are you staring at my breasts?
No.
Well, look at them.
Okay.
What do they make you think?
I don't know.
Do you think they look deformed?
I think they look beautiful.
Do you want to touch them?
Okay.
I've read you talking about making We Are Lady Parts, which is the story of a group of young Muslim women who they form a punk band, and they one of them is a PhD student. Like these are like women charging forward in their passions and interests. Some are getting married off, some are feeling the pressure of being married off, but they want to compete in like a band competition. Like that is sort of the end goal of the Lady Parts group. And I've read you talking about how you felt, it sounds like, a sort of pressure to make a story more sad that was about a bunch of brown women. When you were initially like taking this around, it was like, yeah, but can it be like more grief kind of situation? And what we see with like Slums of Beverly Hills, you have a situation where this is like, there's a dark sort of lining to this movie. This is about like, it's Alan Arkin as the father to 3 children, and they're broke. And he wants to keep them in Beverly Hills because that's the good schools and a good education is forever and an address is temporary sort of situation. But like, there's this sort of undercurrent of melancholy throughout the entirety of Slums of Beverly Hills, where you're watching this poor family have to fit into this rich area and kind of not be themselves because being themselves would cast them out socially and rob them of opportunities. While at the same time, the movie is wanting you to enjoy yourself and enjoy and relate to the awkward silliness of coming of age. And I think like taking something like, teenage girl bodies, which are so fraught. And like you said, when you develop and suddenly you have these curves in the shape, like society changes your place in how you move through the world. And to take something like this that does feel so awkwardly, uncomfortably real, but not really dragging itself in sort of like the sad discomfort of that kind of change. It's nice to watch something where it's like, yeah, but something that is tough doesn't have to feel shameful and shitty. You can just sort of laugh along with it. If you know, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the use of comedy is so powerful in this movie because it's disarming, it brings you in, and then when those poignant moments hit you, when you see Alan Arkin's character at his lowest and you see the family really struggle, it hits in a kind of very deep way because you're so disarmed, you're so in love with these characters, you're so having such a joyful time that I feel like, if anything, it just brings up those darker moments in a really poignant way. And I think, I always am obsessed with comedy because in its power of, I think, bringing audiences in and bringing them close and exploring complex. This film and these characters and this girl's experiences actually explored with such complexity. And sometimes I feel like there's an idea that comedy can kind of flatten that. But actually, this film is just full of nuance. And as you say, the light and the dark sit so closely, and it just feels so true to your experience of being a teenage girl, like how, it's everything, it's, everything happening all at once. It's like constantly there together. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
I don't need you. I don't need your stupid shoes or your clothes. I don't need anything from you or anybody. Don't come near me. The whole family is sick. I hate us. We're freaks.
We're not freaks.
Oh, we're not.
No.
Oh, what then?
Slums of Beverly Hills is in its way too like a story of sort of found sisterhood between Vivian's character and Marissa Tomei's character, who is like the late 20s, serial in and out of rehab. She comes to live with his family because Alan Arkin's like, you're my brother. If I'm going to look after your daughter, it's going to cost you. And that way he can kind of upgrade them in Beverly Hills.
She's given it a lot of thought, Mickey. She wants to be a nurse. What she says is something she's always dreamed of. I don't know. I think it's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, it'll give her a fresh start, and I can keep an eye on her. I can't do it alone, though, Mickey. I'm going to need help, and it's not going to be cheap.
You're going to have to kick in, Mickey, on a monthly. Yeah, here she is.
Hi, Poppy. Yeah. A nurse.
And I wanted to hear about, like, was that something that registered when you watched this film early on? Was that sisterly connection with those two characters? Was that something that spoke to you even then, early watching film?
Absolutely. I mean, I was obsessed with Marissa Tomei's character. She's just flawed and yet lovable and warm and complex and sexy. And, I just thought she was magnificent. And like her and Natasha Lyonne's Vivian are just this joyful pairing. There's this amazing dance scene, in many ways. The dance scene, Polite Society, is very much inspired where these two just start to move and start to jive, and they're in their bodies. And you see, Marissa Tomei's character really encouraging Vivian to love her sexuality. Marissa Tomei is so kind of overtly sexual in a really empowered, great way. She's so comfortable in her own skin. And it's so exciting to see this character on screen because you're like, she's fully embodied as a woman. And, we see a lot of tits in this film.
Yeah.
It's the first time I'd seen this much boob and it not be from the male gaze. I was like, we can show our boobs in cinema? Like, that's okay to do? Because I was so glad it did show the boobs, because you feel, again, like by hiding them would be shaming them. So by seeing it on camera, like these amazing, beautiful boob shots, I'm just like, being a woman's point of view, my tiny teenage mind exploded so much through this film, and how much representation I felt so seen constantly in so many different ways, and like exploring burgeoning sexuality, that feeling of shame and disgust in your body when she wants to get a boob reduction. And I felt those very same feelings, like you'll somehow all of a sudden go from being like a geeky whatever to like some cheap, you just treat it as though you're disgusting because of your physical changes. It's just, it just encapsulates so much. And I'm obsessed.
And I wonder for the folks out there who did not like come into boobs in their developmental years, like if they realize like what the way the world bends around like, I remember you didn't want to be the first girl who got boobs in your grade. You didn't want to be that I remember that girl. I remember when that girl got boobs in my grade, and it was 4th grade. And we didn't know what that word meant, but that girl was a slut.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when that word started being put on that girl in my class in the 4th grade, something we'd heard from older siblings and movies and probably parents. And suddenly, because she looked more like a grown-up than we did, that was the label that got put on her.
Yeah.
And that was nothing different but her showing up at school. Like, that is suddenly how the world develops differently around you and assesses what your role is in everyone's life and choices you have made and private things about you, simply by virtue of a girl's body coming into form. And I just like, that is a core memory for me. Remembering how big of a deal it was that some other girl around me got boobs, and we all we were entitled to have a goddamn opinion about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I was that girl. I was one of the first two in my class, and honestly,
thoughts and prayers. Wow.
Yeah, I stopped doing sport. I stopped doing martial arts. I internalized some sort of shame, and that's my art is all about me trying to reclaim something that I lost in those years. And that's why whenever I see women's stories being told with the nuance and the truth and the complexity and the pain and the joy through, it honestly, it means everything. So yeah, it's like, people don't realize how this is a film, so much about this girl's boobs, but I'm like, this is some traumatizing shit when you're at the front line, and the way that, all our stories are told by men, and and that's within the patriarchy where women have been traditionally objectified throughout all the years,
ever, forever,
ever and ever. Are men like, mate, we got to do something about it. We got to take the reins here. We got to tell our own stories. And this film for me really changed something. It made me feel different in my body when I watched it. And I'm so excited by this conversation because
I feel like we're coming to this, I would like to think of us coming to this different threshold of how we understand that the only way to present bodies on screen is not the way we've understood it since the glorious erotic thriller era of the 90s kind of situation. But there's something about the fun of watching those movies comes with the taboo and the sort of transgression of being man, they don't make them like they used to. And I want the erotic thriller back, but I also don't want to make them quite like we used to, because how we used to exactly isn't 100% cool. But then I remember when the movie Revenge came out, and I was talking to the director Coralie Farge about how important it was to her to have her lead character in a bikini or something equivalent basically the entire time. When we meet Matilda Lutz's character, she's not wearing much clothes, and then she's in a bikini, she's by the swimming pool, and when she comes into sort of her final girl attire, she's in almost tactical underwear throughout the rest of the movie. And it was so important to her to want to keep Matilda sort of exposed the entire time, because she did not want her strength and her essentially final girl arc to be dictated by an arrival of modesty into her character. She wanted the exposure of her body and her skin when she was vulnerable and she was assaulted in the film to be the same amount of exposure as when she was at her most powerful and killing her oppressors, because the amount of skin showing was not a reflection at all of her humanity or the vengeance she deserved or her power. And so to watch something like Polite Society and have that wonderful, messy, tangible kind of fighting style, so your actors can actually do the moves themselves as much in camera as you can get. I think the idea of giving us different possibility models for what female physicality can embody, particularly about young developing women, is such a cool thing to be excited about and to prioritize in your work.
Thank you. And what you say about it's difficult as women when we're approaching for how we put our bodies on screen. Again, so much of I feel like the patriarchy, we've internalized it. And even as I'm thinking about how much skin to show, how little skin to show, especially when I was making my show We Are Lady Parts about Muslim women.
Yes.
Modesty, I don't know, there's something in that word of modesty. It's got to be right. If it's right for you, it's all great. But there's shame around it to think that we've got to cover up to be somehow acceptable in society, right? So again, like you're saying in Revenge and in Slums of Beverly Hills, we see flesh. It celebrates flesh, and it's embodied and it's empowered. And it's so important in just thinking consciously about how we film and put women's bodies on screen.
Well, and is that something with We Are Lady Parts? I guess I wanted to hear from you about the process of asserting that you're allowed to have as I understand it, I think your family is Pakistani Muslim, and I think raised across Singapore and London. And I wanted to hear from you about in your career asserting that you have permission to be joyful and you have permission to present that on screen, and that is something that in its unfortunately in the vast barren desert of representation, when you become responsible for being everybody's avatar in your community, being asserting joy as can be sorry, here's the burden of representation revolution on your shoulders to carry about that.
Yeah, I mean, I felt it and it was heavy, but ultimately I had to let go of it and just kind of just really sort of hone in on who I am and my specific truth. And so much of that, as you say, was just showing Muslim women expressing joy and being funny. That was honestly, I'm for me, I've got this show needs to show a diverse group of women who are different in their bodies, have different, wear their religion and their identity in different ways, yet love each other. This was also something about the sisterhood being like, you do you, man, I'll do me, and we still have love. And that was so much. And like how they wear their clothes, how, the costuming was everything of like how they express their identities, how they feel great. And even the aesthetic of the film, I was like, I want this to feel beautiful. Each of the characters to feel like we are celebrating their bodies, their visual, their aesthetic, because it's about all these different ways of existing being celebrated. No one is right, no one is wrong. It's just personal taste. And I feel like, especially as Muslim women, there's a question, there's an idea that we're all like the same. It's like there's so much diversity within that experience. And so for me, like, I wanted to show that kind of that breadth of different ways of being.
Every time the character of Rahila in Polite Society, can you tell me the name of that actress?
Nimra Butcher is her name.
Oh my God. The glamour, the style. Every time she was on screen, I was like, she is feasting right now. And that she became immediately one of my favorite just like bitch matriarchs in a movie.
Oh, I'm so glad you loved it, because she was everything for me. I want to see a matriarch upholding the patriarchy.
Yes! We've got to see that! We are dropping the ball if we are not showing the Serena Joys who are upholding the whole goddamn system.
Absolutely. Nothing is more vicious than your own kicking you in the face. It was fun to show her. Great hair. Like, I love being able to explore the dark feminine with the light feminine, whatever that even means. It's showing an angry woman, kick ass, and like it's still empowering somehow, even though she's not on the right side, if you will. But she's like fierce and beautiful and sexy and all these things, bitter and angry. And I was so excited to show that side of femininity as well with that character.
I immediately wanted to see somehow her and Shohreh Aghdashloo in some sort of teaming up capacity with just like glamorous women with like deep voices, like making everything else in the world dim by comparison. I was like, how do we get them together in something?
That would be sick.
I think the universe would blank out of existence, or at least I would. So that it could simply be too much. It is time for a quick break, but I will be right back with Nida Manzoor. And then at the very end, I will let you know a little bit about the latest episode of Screen Drafts that I was on. Pride Month has just ended, but it is a Pride Month spectacular. So hang around at the end and I will let you know a little more about it.
The following is a promo for Beef and Dairy Network podcast.
Hello, please, you have to help me. I was kidnapped and bundled into the back of a van. I was taken to the docks and beaten with chains and tied up inside a shipping container. And then I was forced to listen to episode after episode of a podcast called Beef and Dairy Network. And I absolutely loved every second of it. Please, you have to tell me where I can listen to more episodes.
The Beef and Dairy Network podcast is a multi-award-winning comedy podcast, and you can find it at MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Somewhere in an alternate universe where Hollywood is smarter.
And the Emmy nominees for Outstanding Comedy Series are Jetpackula, Airport Marriott, Thruple, Dear America, We've Seen You Naked, and Allah in the Family.
In our stupid universe, you can't see any of these shows, but you can listen to them on Dead Pilot Society, the podcast that brings you hilarious comedy pilots that the networks and streamers bought but never made. Journey to the alternate television universe of Dead Pilot Society on MaximumFun.org.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. Today I'm talking to the director of the new film Polite Society, Nida Manzoor. Nida is also the BAFTA-winning creator, writer, director of the series We Are Lady Parts. And the film she's brought to us today is Tamara Jenkins' first feature starring a teenage Natasha Lyonne It is Slums of Beverly Hills, an underseen treasure. So let's get back to it. I wanted to hear from you about, like, you know, in the inverse of like the beauty and the style of Polite Society, like what we have in Slums of Beverly Hills is this like extremely normal, like 1970s, like this kind of like, it's pops of color, but it's got like this family's living in a sort of drab situation. And I wanted to hear from you about the tangibility of watching a movie where it just feels so like, it's sort of, it's stylish in its own right, but it also feels sort of so outside of overt stylization that it feels like you can really immerse yourself. And that is somebody like immersing themselves in teen movies. Where did this sort of sit in terms of like its aesthetic for you? It's not a Bring It On. It's not a like hyper real adjacent to this own universe we live in language. It is just like dropping in on people in a slice of life. And I wanted to hear about that as like impressionable upon you as a filmmaker. Like, what was this like for you to watch as someone who would go on to tell stories of their own?
Wow, this is such a great question. I think you're right. There's something was so refreshing about watching this film compared to the Bring It Ons, which is so polished, perfectly turned out. Everyone's got this amazing hair. There is a kind of grit to Slums of Beverly Hills.
You feel the sweat on people in this movie a little bit.
You smell it. You feel like the heat. You feel like, yeah, as you say, the sweat. There's a grime. It's the Slums of Beverly Hills. There's a kind of, it's a bit gross. And, you know, I also look to another film that, you know, when I think about coming of age, about womanhood, is that film Raw, the French film by Julia Ducournau.
Man, that one really got under my skin and in my heart. That was, I love that movie. And that performance just by the central performance in that, the character of Justine, is just so absolutely grab you by the throat remarkable. Oh,
isn't it? But even with that film, just like Slums of Beverly Hills, there's a kind of a grime. It just feels dirty and disgusting. And there's something that's so empowering to see women portrayed through a disgusting lens, not in an ugly way. It's beautifully aesthetic, but there's a grime. There's like a truthful like dirt and grit, and like, you know, as women, we always like have this pressure to be like perfectly turned out, perfectly off. But these films are like showing women through a lens of like, again, truthfulness. There's this incredible French philosopher, Virginie Despentes. He says women are more like King Kong than Kate Moss. And that, for me, speaks of both these movies. It makes you feel like, again, like I don't need to perform some sort of ridiculous version of femininity where I need to be perfectly turned out. You know, it's empowering to see women just be gross, you know, in their bodies, and like own them. And I say gross, beautiful, but, you know, we internalize this idea of like something wrong with us. We bleed every month. You know, we grow hair, we sweat. It's just like, seeing that in Raw as well, the kind of body horror, the physicality, that's just, I felt very represented by that as well. And I felt like there's a kind of a connection to Slums of Beverly Hills as well.
Well, that's another sisters film. Like that is like the way that Raw triumphs as a sisters film, and just sort of like the unflinching brutality with which those two girls, like those two central characters, come at each other in the end, just like locked jaws, biting into each other in public. Like that's a fight scene where it's like, well, we need to have like the first AD here, like we need to choreograph to make sure it's safe, but you're like, shit, did somebody walk out of here without a hand? Like, this looks like it got pretty bad.
That fight scene was so inspiring to me when I approached my sister fight. Like, as you're saying, biting chunks out of each other. And I was like, I felt so seen in that scene, because that's what it feels like when you fight with your sister. She is biting a piece out of you. She knows exactly how to fucking kick you where it hurts. I was like, I gotta have some biting in my fight.
Well, and I've had some long conversations with the UK film journalist Anna Bogutskaya about like gross women, and like the wanting to revel in sort of like the grossness of a terrifying woman. And what we sort of honed in on was the Australian horror movie The Loved Ones, which features your central antagonist is a high school girl who her and her dad like kidnap suitors for her and torture them, and you enter this story as they kidnap a suitor, and it's following sort of him as our main hero, with him trying to get free of this like prom within their house, like dinner before the dance between Princess, the lead girl, and Daddy, and the boy that they tie down to a chair in the kitchen in the dining area. And like, this actress is beautiful, and like the character of Princess she's very pretty, but like when you meet her at the table, she's like eating chicken really nastily, and she's got like grease on her face, she's got like stuff on her fingers. And the idea of putting grossness onto beautiful people is like, no, it's not like just something that we should attach to like hagsploitation. Like, hey, when you see gross women that are gross all the time, like you should know that they're evil and you should avoid them. Like the idea of like taking a beautiful character and then just sort of soaking them in something that is revolting is a really like cool thing to see, and extra scary, because it's like, wow, you thought you could bet on that packaging, and you thought, you know, for most of the time, like you thought you could trust that white woman, but like you sure can't.
That is so true. And there's something about eating and women eating, which I also just absolutely adore seeing in cinema, because again, as women, there's sometimes a complicated relationship with food, you know?
Yeah.
Look is everything, society tells us. So what you eat is everything. So seeing a woman chow down messily, like I have a few in like a few scenes where the women are eating, and I'm like, I what's wrong with me? You know, you have to like reflect on yourself and be like, what's happening? Why do I want my actors to like stuff a duck in their face in the most disgusting way? I'm just because like, again, food represents something. It's like a woman eating and not caring about her physical appearance. It's just like something that feels radical still in seeing women just chow down big time on screen, you know?
Isn't it nuts that we can be in 2023 and be like, isn't it wild to see women eating on screen? But it kind of still feels like it is.
Still is. Oh man, that's true. It's still a thing. It's still a thing.
Yeah, like you're like, it's amazing that like, you know, having like being like, I want to show the violence like of hell as a teenage girl as like choreographed fight scenes and like the savagery of the patriarchy through like a violent plot to like hijack a woman. But also in some level, it's like, but also what's crazy would be watching them eat. It's like,
No, I mean, it's kind of sad that still like I'm just there on the monitor, like, eat that burger, loving it. Like get some weird kick out of like, please, like, working through some demons here, but like in their like wedding regalia,
yes,
wedding outfits, burgers, it's all of it juxtaposed this sort of, you know, they're essentially human baubles in these outfits, but you know, it's those things of the need to be beautiful, you know, just being smacked with like, eat that burger.
This is me subverting an expectation. Now, you're like, listen, it can like, I just want it to be about women indulging in things, like whether that's a burger or each other or dancing or. Now, to that end, like we have in Slums of Beverly Hills, this character who just like so not fitting in one's body, but like also being reinforced that like, wow, you're quite the hottie over there. I wanted to talk about that, like that notion of like watching a character who's being given the cues that they are desirable as a result of the way that their body is changing. But while at the same time, that is at odds with like the socially acceptable form of desirability that this girl has grown into in Vivian is something that's actually something she doesn't want at all. And I wanted to hear about like, did that sort of touch on with your experience? Like you said, you had to you stopped doing martial arts. Like you changed things that you loved about your life because like theoretically you got these assets came in that you should have viewed as something you were grateful for, but were something that were foisted upon you. And like, watching the experience of like, oh God, no, I want to reject my allegedly like babeness as well and put that away. Like, and then we, I guess, learn at a certain point that like, no, I guess I should embrace this babeness. But what does being a babe even mean to me? Like, where did you start finding your hotness, I guess?
Man, you know, so I'm still on the road. You know, that said, like, shit, it's weird. You're right. That's how I don't know how Slums of Beverly Hills can carry these two things. It's like, yes, she's all of a sudden desirable, but the kind of she's being objectified. She's only being seen for her breasts, you know? Yeah. And all these other things that she was and that she is are just gone. And then now you're reduced to this one thing. And it's incredibly like, it reduces you. Mm-hmm. You stop being seen for your full complexity. And it flips. Like the day it happens, as you say, society shifts around you. Mm-hmm.
You become a fucking 25-year-old out there. They're like, so you're legal and eligible. How about it?
I know, man. It's distressing. It's distressing. And this film is able to, you know, she's desirable. She wants to explore her sexuality. She, you know, is on some level interested in seeing what her breasts can get her.
Yeah.
But also feeling deformed, feeling uncomfortable in her own skin. Tamara Jenkins is able to show, these two often what seem contradictory things of being in your body, of like, sometimes you feel really hot about it. You feel like these are great. And then no, you feel like you're the whole reason your dad's having a horrible time, the world sucks, is because you've changed and you're sort of responsible internal. She's able to show this complexity and these contradictory things. It's just the nuance of being that I couldn't quite I can't quite verbalize it. It's just the magic of what she's done here. It's not like boobs are evil. You see our character really, embrace and explore what they could mean for her and enjoy them, but then feel the shame and feel the idea of being deformity. It's just the masterpiece that is this film that I feel everyone should see. Yeah.
Very sadly, I could just keep going with you. As we very sadly come to toward the end of the time, I guess that leads me to wanting to ask you about the notion of power and the female body. And taking, with polite society, you give a very a very clear, tangible ability to our protagonist, to all the characters, the ability to physically overpower and kick someone else's ass. That is taking this awkward, tumultuous time and be I'm going to give these people basically a superpower to beat the brakes off of somebody around them. And she aspires, our main character aspires to a career. She wants to be a stunt woman where you become a physical instrument of precision and control. And I wanted to hear from you, taking that and then taking sort of the Slums of Beverly Hills aspect of it, where we see a girl coming into this stage in her life where the stage where girls are told they have power. The stage where girls start hearing from perhaps not good people well, I just couldn't control myself, or you're just so beautiful. And where there is the illusion of power put on developing girls that absolves the people who actually have it of the responsibility of wielding it in a meaningful and protective way to be no, but you have so much power over me. I look at Alicia Silverstone's entire early filmography, 3 movies in a row about her being so beautiful, men have no choice but to try and have sex with her, and she's fully a minor and a high school student. And it's what if she was so hot, men couldn't control themselves? So I wanted to hear from you, just sort of putting those 2 movies in conversation of under the topic of how your relationship and your sort of mindset right now on the power that women have as a sort of contrast to the power that they're told they have, that is a tool that is used to scapegoat people who should be not exploiting women and their bodies, but be well, once you get hot enough, I guess you have this seductive power I can't do anything about. I want to hear from you about the sort of duality of the power and the illusion of power of young women coming into the world.
Wow.
Enterprise question, dive in.
That is Jordan. Oh, Jordan.
I came for us to have a good time, to really cover some ground.
Honestly, when I approached my film, I don't really go into Rhea's worries about her body. If anything,
sure.
I was I wanted this character to just feel embodied, and that be the power of the movie. You see her in herself, in her power, in her element, in a way I never felt. So it's in that way, it was exciting to show a character just believe in themselves. And again, like you say, the physicality of the character meant that I could explore a woman in her power. And Rhea gets hit down, she gets back up, hit.
Yes.
I hope one day someone does a supercut of how many times this girl got smacked in the face.
Put it on the extras. Somebody put it on the extras.
Her power is in her ability to risk failure, which as women, we're often it's just a lot of fear around failure, because there's we hold ourselves to such an insanely high standard of perfection that sometimes you don't even take the risk, you don't even swing, because the fear of failure is so great. To see a character risk failure constantly was so exciting and joyful, and that for me was what was really exciting. And I think Slums of Beverly Hills is different, and she goes into my character is embodied and is moving through the world and is dealing with this society not accepting her. What I feel with Slums of Beverly Hills, it's so much more. There's a kind of internal anguish about her body. And that is, again, you feel seen in a different way. I feel it's empowering to see Rhea Khan embodied physical fighter. Okay, she gets smacked in the face, but she's a girl in her body and fully in control of it. And that is exciting and empowering, but it's equally empowering, and you feel equally seen when you see a character like in Slums of Beverly Hills have to find and negotiate the truth and the kind of messiness and the shame and that is all at play and is shown in that film. So it's like they're different in those ways, but I feel like there's so much you can gain from both depictions of Rhea's a woman in her body, a young woman in her body fighting. She didn't give up martial arts like I gave up martial arts. She was almost like the version of myself I wish I could have been in ways. Whereas like with Vivian, this is a girl who is in the trenches with her body, in the trenches. And it's just another kind of joyfulness to see that explored in cinema. Like cinema, our stories are deserving of cinema. This is a movie film. I'm like, I couldn't get over it when I saw Slums of Beverly Hills, that I was exploring this, like, is this important enough that it's in cinema? You feel all of a sudden your small struggles are important, are valid, and you're finally seen.
Yes.
I felt seen so deeply by Slums of Beverly Hills, and yeah. Oh my God, Jordan, I could wax lyrical for hours. I am evangelical about this film, like I said. A cornerstone of cinema. Sure, go see your Kubricks. Go see, Yeah,
they're good. Like, they're good, but everybody knows they are. So, like, I don't need to tell you to go watch Citizen Kane. It's at the top of the list forever. So, but what I need to tell you, and you need to hear, is to go watch Slums of Beverly Hills.
Absolutely.
And also, go watch Polite Society. Yes. Because, listen, it's nice to see a young girl character whose worst enemy isn't herself. Like, that's cool. We gotta see that sometimes. It's necessary, but it's nice to see when a girl's worst enemy is not herself, and that, like you said, like there's such a delight in her being unencumbered by the concerns of how like herself could hold her back. And it's only just like her kind of crazy imagination compared with like an actual healthy dose of skepticism. Turns out she was really right about a lot of things. But to just watch her get to be so certain and so like able to fail that she will just keep running through walls and sometimes hit a steel beam in the middle, but bounce right back up when it throws on the floor and keep going.
Yes. Oh gosh, Jordan, I couldn't have said it better myself. That is everything.
We deserve the confidence of men to just run straight through walls, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, but you just get back and be like, I nailed it, right?
I nailed it, right? Well, Nida, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today about all of this. It went on unexpected tributaries, and I'm so grateful to you for following me down those tributaries and really digging into them.
Oh, no, thank you, Jordan. It's like such a delight to get to chat to you and I don't get to talk like this about films I love and in this depth about boobs. Like,
thank you, Nida. I have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much once again to Nida Manzoor for being our guest on this, the 75th episode of Feeling Seen. We are celebrating our 75th episode here with a guest I have wanted to have on for ages and ages and ages. What a win. Polite Society is in theaters now. And if you haven't watched We Are Lady Parts, it's on Peacock. You can watch it. These are hours you can spend across this show and this film with fucking rad girls. Just rad girls. They're dope and they do dope shit. And I highly recommend you check both of them out, support women in cinema, and go see Polite Society in a theater. It's a really feel-good time. And who doesn't want that at the movies? You know what? Have yourself a Feeling Seen double feature. Go to see Mafia Mama and Polite Society in the theaters. And that will make you feel good. I can pretty much guarantee that. And now that one quick thing before I go, I am directing you to yet another episode of me being on the Screen Drafts podcast. And the reason I'm doing that is because we are coming right after Pride Month. And this is a Pride-themed episode of Screen Drafts. And it is also my 11th episode. And when you consider that, like, I don't think I've ever done an episode of that show that was less than 3 hours. Like, that is just so many hours of collaboratively and competitively building lists of movies with the Screen Drafts gang. it is an extra exciting occasion because the theme of the draft is lesbians, and my co-drafters are Emily St. James and her wife, Libby Hill. I mean, what a treat to do the lesbians draft. What a treat to draft with either Emily or Libby, but all of that together at the same time. At the end of the draft, I do say, obviously I'm not going to tell you what's on it, but like at the end of the draft, I do remark to everybody at one point, I'm like, I can't believe we're getting out of here without putting blank movie on this list. It was unintentional, but it just never happened. It just never came up. So, as always, you got to hit play on that to find out what movies made the cut, what movies that you're really passionate about will you find there, and what movies are you really passionate about that you will be heartbroken to not see. I had to break my own heart and leave off one of my favorite nice movies of all time. I still stand by my choice, but I'm still so sad that there wasn't just like one more spot on the list I could have tucked something into. But again, I'm not going to tell you what it is. But happy post-Pride. Go celebrate it with lesbian films. And that's how we're going to end the show. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingSeenPod or send us an email at feelingseen@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jorker on Twitter. That's JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows,
supported directly by you.